most people in this room are not Medicare eligible. Is there anyone in this room that believes that when they become eligible, Medicare may not exist? Okay, that's a valid point, and I want to go through where we've been and where I see Medicare going. Medicare came into effect actually through the Social Security Act of 1965 through the Johnson administration. And at that time, there was a need. The government realized there was a need, a growing elderly community, and people were not capable of obtaining reasonable medical care. So they started the Social Security Act, and as each of us obtained a paycheck, part of that SSDI would go towards this fund, and it would be a pool of funds where elderly individuals would be able to utilize those funds for reasonable medical care. So that was in 1965 through the Johnson administration. It wasn't until 1980 that Congress set up or passed a federal statute, the Medicare Secondary Payer Act. That was in 1980, and that documented that Medicare should always be secondary, should always be a secondary payer when primary insurance exists. And what do I mean by primary insurance? Workers' compensation, general liability, auto coverage, uninsured motorist, underinsured motorist, homeowners insurance. So that was the first step 15 years later where the process was moving forward, where they tried to designate and make sure that Medicare's interests were taken into account. It wasn't until 2007, 27 years later, that the Medicare-Medicaid S-CHIP Extension Act came into effect. And that act was the teeth that the Medicare Secondary Payer Act of 1980 was missing. That act documented that all private health care and liability insurers must report to Medicare and let them know when a third-party lawsuit had taken place that they were involved in. Prior to this, Medicare was getting reamed. Money was going out, no money was coming back in. And in 2011, to further extend that Medicare-Medicaid S-CHIP Extension Act, we created the SMART Act. The SMART Act is an acronym for Strengthening Medicare and Repaying Taxpayers. The system has been going bankrupt for years because money goes out, no money was coming back in for payments that Medicare made that were secondary when primary insurance existed. So, actually I want to make a point here, given the word of the day. Most people juxtapose Medicare and Medi-Cal. Medi-Cal is a needs-based process, and Medicare is an entitlement. If you're entitled to Medicare, if you reach certain criteria, you are entitled. There are three main criteria to obtain Medicare coverage. 1, 65 or greater. 2, if you have end-stage renal failure, which is kidney failure. And 3rd, if you apply for Social Security disability insurance and you get approved, 24 months from the date that you're approved, you automatically qualify for Medicare. There are 3 parts of Medicare that most people aren't aware of. Part A, B, and D as in dog. Part A is for hospital care, hospital coverage. Part B is for physician medical coverage, and Part D is for all medications prescriptions. Now, most people have an option. There's Part C, which is called Medicare Advantage. Medicare Advantage is a step up from basic Medicare, where you can actually pay a higher premium and be exposed to a larger pool of doctors and possibility of better prescription pricing and whatnot. You can go from Medicare Advantage back down to Medicare, back and forth the rest of your life as many times as you need to, as long as you pay those premiums. So I wanted to leave with an example of why the system became bankrupt and why I believe the system is moving in the right direction. A perfect example would be a person that gets involved in an auto accident, traumatic brain injury, they got T-boned, they're age 65, they're on Medicare. For the next 2 years, they go through treatment, medications, drugs, they rack up $200,000 in bills. They get represented by a personal injury attorney. They end up settling 3 years later, and that settlement value is $1 million. The attorney gets his third cut. That person ends up with $700,000 in their pocket. Now, with the reporting acts that are required today, Medicare would be able to recoup that $200,000 that they previously paid as conditional payments out of that $700,000 to the injured worker. But previously, people were double dipping. You would have Medicare would pay out $200,000, be unaware what the left and right was doing, be unaware that the $700,000 settlement existed, and times that by tens of thousands of lawsuits around the country. It had to happen. I think we're moving in the right direction, and I believe it will be around when the youngest person in this room is eligible for Medicare. Thank you.